I welcome you all into this live webinar program organized by the Indian Psychiatric Society Sleep Medicine Specialty section. And I am Dr. Saurav Das, a consultant psychiatrist from Calcutta, and I am extremely pleased to have all my esteemed speakers and faculties and also Dr. Ravinda Brahma with me. I think the program today is one of the series of live webinars, around three or four at least, where we'll be talking about the different interfaces of sleep and psychiatry. So today's first webinar is on the topic of sleep and cognition, because as we know that sleep is something which we don't, give very much importance, mostly because of our very hectic schedule and ever fast-paced life that is happening to all of us, more so in the COVID times. And that, of course, has been found out to affect cognition in a big way, both in the immediate term, in the intermediate term, as well as in the long term. And once the cognition is affected, it also can affect sleep in a bidirectional relationship. So we have wonderful speakers today to talk on various subsections of the topic. But before starting all these, I would like to welcome Dr. Ravinda Brahma, the Honorary General Secretary of Indian Psychiatric Society, for his gracious presence to be here. Ravinda, now I hand over the mic to you.
Thank you, Saurabh. It's really a privilege for me to attend this particular webinar, a very important webinar, I can say, from clinical point of view. Because as you have rightly mentioned, that sleep and cognition is definitely something very challenging to all the psychiatrists. And we know for a long time, we are trying to find out the relationship between sleep deprivation and cognition, how sleep contributes to our cognitive process and learning, all these things. And already there are many papers that sleep deprivation has a detrimental effect on the cognitive function and learning. So, however, we know very little about this. We require more and more research. And I think in today's webinar, we will get some recent information, recent updates about the role of sleep in our attention, concentration, memory, learning, in everything. And today, I'm really happy that the sleep medicine specialty section of IPS, led by Dr. Sanjeeva Datta as advisor, Dr. Ravi Gupta he's the chairman, and my dear brother Saurav as the convener, and Dr. Ruma from Bhopal, he's the EC coordinator. They have organized this important program on the webinar, so many people can attend. They can update their knowledge. They can know the recent advances, and we have speakers, 5 very young, very talented, my dear speakers: Dr. Anesha, Dr. Priyaranjan, Dr. Harsal, Dr. Ankur, and Dr. Sachin. So we'll definitely learn a lot from all of you, and all the audience will be benefited from this webinar, and I hope all the best. I wish you all the best for this particular program. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravinda. Thank you so much. Actually, the welcome address was supposed to be given by Dr. Sanjeeva Datta, but he is having some health issues. He is having a high fever currently and had been kind of hospitalized yesterday. So he has excused himself, of course, with the diligent reasons. So coming to the topic, what we have done is that in order to understand the interface between sleep and cognition, we have decided to divide it into a few subparts or chapters. For example, in the first chapter, we will be discussing about the neurological basis of sleep, because unless and until we know how exactly sleep works and what is the underlying biological process, we will not be able to comprehend the later part of the presentations, not only in this webinar, but also for the subsequent webinars that we will be discussing on sleep and other psychiatry interfaces. So to discuss on the neurobiological basis of sleep, we have Dr. Meshak Das from Guwahati, Assam. Then after his presentation, we'll come to the second chapter, in which we will try to find out what is the impact of sleep on cognition, and will be presented by Dr. Priyaranjan Avinash from Dehradun, Uttarakhand. And then he will be speaking on the impact of sleep on what sleep deprivation causes to the current cognition levels. And we will also learn from Dr. Harshal Sathe from Wardha, Maharashtra, about how we can modulate cognition while sleeping. There are ways that are coming up now, though in a very experimental stage, where by doing certain things we can modulate our level of cognition, memory, etc., while we are sleeping. So Dr. Sathe will be talking about that. We will then go on to how sleep affects the risk of cognitive degeneration, or rather the lack of sleep, or the quality and quantity, and etc. We have Dr. Ankur Sachdeva from Delhi to discuss on that topic. And after that, last but not the least, we will also understand the other way around of the thing, like how cognitive degeneration, once it sets in, how it affects sleep. What are the sleep disorders that are prominent in the people who are having severe or moderate to severe cognitive degeneration. We have Dr. Sachin from Dharwad, Karnataka, to enlighten us on the same. So let's move on to the first chapter, neurobiological basis of sleep. We are having Dr. Anveshak Das from East Zone of Indian Psychiatric Society. He is an MD consultant psychiatrist from Guwahati, Assam, as is an invited speaker at various conferences and CMEs. He has various papers in national and international journals, and is a very busy clinical practitioner with a lot of inclination towards academics. And I think most of us here are already familiar with his name, and we don't need to go on. Talking trying to introduce him much more. So with this, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Anvesh. Anvesh, please, you can start
Yes, sir.
sharing your screen. A warm welcome.
Are the slides visible?
Yes, 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 Anvesh. Yes.
Yeah. A very good morning to all respected teachers, my dear seniors, and friends and colleagues. A very good morning. And at the very outset, my sincere gratitude and thanks to the IPS Sleep Speciality section for including me today in this webinar. And of course, to my very dear Dada, Saurav Dada, I thank you for including me and for introducing me, even though I am not a very busy clinician using those words. Uh, um, uh, as Saurabh has already spoken, the very first chapter which I'll be presenting will be the neurobiological basis of sleep. As we all know, it will be just a brushing aside and just a revision of whatever we have studied in our postgraduate days. And we all know that it's a very complex process, sleep, and how both wakefulness, REM, NREM, sleep, and so also how the homeostasis process and the circadian rhythm works in our wakefulness and sleep process. It's a very complex and a lot of neurotransmitters and circuits are involved. So basically, in this 10-15 minutes lecture, I have tried to simplify those things so that we can understand better. And if any PGs are present today in this webinar, I guess it will be much helpful for them. So, at the very outset, to define sleep, there has been many definitions of how sleep has been described and what is the definition of sleep. It's been defined by many researchers, many scientists who are doing work in this area. But in a very simplified way, it is a state of very decreased awareness from the environmental stimuli, and it is distinguished from the state of coma or hibernation because of its rapid reversibility. We always get up from sleep and we are not in that comatose stage. And also one very significant difference that relates to sleep and coma is that even though when we are sleeping, we are in a state of relative unconsciousness. But unlike coma, we do remember that we are going to fall asleep, that we are being sleepy. And when we get up or when we awake from that sleep, we know that we have slept for some time and do remember some part of the dreams or whatever has happened during that sleep process. So that is what differentiates from coma or other unconscious state. Sleep has a lot of physiological functions and a lot of important regulation that it does to the body. It helps us in the information processing. It helps us in the memory consolidation. It in a way it helps us in the metabolism of the body, toxin clearance, rebuilding the metabolic process. It helps in the tissue repair, and finally it helps us in the energy replenishment. We all know these stages of sleep. Earlier, there was four stages, but now the in NREM sleep. But now stage 3 and 4 has been clubbed as one stage, stage N3. Uh, from the wakefulness state where there is the alpha waves, we go into the stage 1, which is known as N1, where we find the theta waves. Then we go on to the stage 2, where we find the sleep spindles and the K complex, and then the shortwave sleep, which is the deepest part of sleep, which is the N3 stage, and we find the delta waves. And then we go on to the REM part of sleep, where there is the rapid eye movement is present. Normally, in the normal state, in the normal physiological state, when a person sleeps for average to 7 to 8 hours, the whole NREM and REM sleep takes around 90 to 110 to roughly 120 minutes, and 5 to 10% of that sleep is spent in N1 stage. The N2 comprises of most of the significant part, 50 to 60% of sleep. Then the rest, REM and stage N3 comprises roughly 20 to 25%. However, in the later part of the sleep, we know that the shortwave sleep or the N3 decreases, and the duration of REM increases. So these are the stages of sleep. These are the very basics we all know. And this is a very busy slide. I won't go into the very details of it. It roughly shows what are the behavioral and physiological changes that takes place when we are awake, when we are in the NREM part of the sleep, stage 1 to 3, and then the REM part of the sleep. And when I was going through the slide, one very significant point was missing is the endocrinal changes that also occurs in sleep, like the secretion of the growth hormone, secretion of the prolactin hormone, which takes place during the sleep. Cortisol usually decreases when we sleep, but it increases in the later part of the sleep. And then, of course, the thyroid, which is a very important hormone in our body, which increases with sleep. So that neuroendocrine basis is missing in this slide. The rest, I won't go into the details, the respiratory system, the cardiovascular system, and also the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system, which we all know the changes that takes place. Now, coming to the neurobiological basis of sleep proper, as I already told, it's a very complex mechanism which is comprising of the neurotransmitters and various circuits to takes place. And all these processes works in tandem and finally control our wakefulness, sleep, how sleep changes from NREM to REM sleep, and then again back and forth, how these processes takes place. So all these processes takes place to various neurotransmitters and of course the neurocircuits, which I'll be explaining in a very simple way. Basically, when we see that sleep, it has two processes, the S process, which is known as somnolence process or the homeostatic process, and the C process, which is the circadian process. Literature says that the circadian process is very well defined, but although we know much about the S process, still it's a very area of great interest for the neuroscientists, and work still is going on to find out the proper mechanism of the S process or the homeostatic process. Coming to the S model first, the S model basically controls our wakefulness, the REM sleep, the NREM sleep, and also it works in tandem with the circadian process. Coming to the wakefulness, in the S process, it has been clearly defined that the reticular activating system, comprising of which comprises of the brainstem, the medulla pons, and the midbrain, and it goes the reticular ascending system starts from the medulla pons and the midbrain, and it receives information and inputs, and it promotes the wakefulness areas. Those wakefulness areas promotes excitatory projections to the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the basal forebrain, and stimulates and alerts our brain. Uh, a lot many neurotransmitters and the circuits are involved. These six are the main neurotransmitters and neurocircuits, or the nucleus present in our brain, that controls the wakefulness through the ascending reticular activating system. The first and foremost is the noradrenergic cells, which from the rocus coeruleus, it gives the highest discharge during wakefulness process. The acetylcholine, which is secreted from the cholinergic cells from the substantia innominata and the nucleus basalis mainly, also controls the wakefulness. The histaminergic cells, the dopamine secreted from the ventral tegmentum, serotonin from the raphe nucleus, and finally, a very important neurotransmitter against the hypoprotein or orexin. One very significant thing is that apart from promoting the wakefulness areas, the hypoprotein and orexin in turn can stimulate the other five neurotransmitters. So it's one of the very important neurotransmitter we can say in the wakefulness process. In fact, any lesion in the lateral hypothalamus can lead to what we know as the narcolepsy or sleep paralysis. So these six neurotransmitters transmitted and from the various parts of the brain helps us in the wakefulness process. Coming to the NREM sleep now, a very significant thing occurs is that just before we go to sleep, there is hyperpolarization of the thalamocortical cells. This hyperpolarization leads to the excitatory neurotransmitters being gated at the thalamus, and they fail to reach the cortex. What is this? That it activates the ventrolateral preoptic area, and this is the switch sleep. And once the ventrolateral preoptic area is activated, there is significant release of GABA, and GABA, all we know, all that is a inhibitory neurotransmitter, and GABA in turn inhibits the neurotransmitters that are helping in our arousal system. So GABA in turn inhibits these six wakefulness neurotransmitters. So once the VLPO area is activated, GABA is secreted, and the GABA inhibits the excitatory neurotransmitters, and then we go on to the NREM N1, N2, N3 part of the sleep. Now, a very important thing, the REM sleep. How the REM sleep occurs. Again, when the REM on sleeps, there are two types of cells: the REM on and the REM off cells. Right. The REM on cells are present in the pedunculopontine tegmentum and the lateral dorsal tegmentum. Acetylcholine is the main neurotransmitters that helps in the REM sleep. So once the acetylcholine is secreted from the pedunculopontine tegmentum and the lateral dorsal tegmentum, this switches on the REM sleep, and finally this again in turn inhibits the excitatory neurotransmitters in the ascending reticular activating system. Apart from the cholinergic cells, obviously there will be GABA from the VLPO area. We all know that the REM consists both of the tonic and the phasic part, which I just forgot to describe in the graph. So glutamate is main neurotransmitter which helps in the phasic part, and this is responsible for the muscular twitches which we get in the REM part of sleep. The main part, which is the rapid eye movement part, is again in turn controlled by the acetylcholine from the pedunculo-geniculo-occipital area, and this in turn again has some inhibitory effect on the excitatory neurotransmitter. So this REM on, REM off, and again, the REM on cells again goes back to the NREM sleep, and this the whole system of the REM sleep and the NREM sleep goes in a cyclic manner, and we get that sleep. And then in the later part of the morning, the REM sleep is most, and the NREM part of sleep decreases. Now, when a person goes into the wakefulness process in the morning hours, the REM of cells are activated. What are the REM of sleep? REM of cells. The REM of cells are again the excitatory neurotransmitters, mainly consisting of the norepinephrine and the serotonin from the ascending reticular area. So once they are activated, they have inhibitory impact on the REM cells, and the person wakes up from his sleep. So this process works in tandem and goes in a cyclic manner. Uh, Apart from whatever I have discussed in the REM sleep, the acetylcholine has impact on the other parts of the brain. For the rapid eye movement part, as I have already told, the PGO waves are responsible. The acetylcholine again have excitatory effect on the lateral preoptic area, and this is responsible for the penile erection we get in the REM sleep. And apart from that, from this chart, we can find out how acetylcholine in turn affects the other parts of the brain, and this has the various physiological responsible for the physiological processes that goes in the REM part of the sleep. Now, it's very important to know the flip-flop system. Basically, as I have already described, how a person goes from wakefulness to the NREM part, then the REM part. Again, from the REM, it goes to the NREM sleep. So it depends on the flip-flop system. When the flip system is on, that is, a person is awake, right? When the flop system is on, the person goes to sleep. When the flip system is on, the sleep promoting area, the VLPO area is inhibited, and the person goes in the wakefulness process. We know the 6 neurotransmitters mainly which are affecting. And when the flop system is on, that is, a person goes into a decreased arousal or decreased alertness. That is when the VLPO area gets activated for the GABA, and it impacts the other excitatory neurotransmitters. So this flip-flop system has a mutual inhibitory mechanism, and this is the homeostasis process that takes place in our body. That a person goes to sleep, then again wakes up. Of course, this is again controlled by the circadian rhythm, which I am explaining in the next slide, which comes under the C model of the sleep. And this refers to the circadian rhythm refers to the physical and behavioral changes or the internal biological clock that takes place in the 24-hour cycle of any individual. Of course, the circadian rhythm depends upon the various zigzaggers. Zigzaggers are stimuli that control the C model. It may be light, it may be the food that we take, how much exercise we are doing throughout the day. It depends on the body temperature. And all these zigzaggers or stimuli do have an effect on the C model or the circadian rhythm. What happens? The photic zigzaggers are the main which controls our sleep. When there is darkness, the photic when a dark light enters our retina, it goes through the retinohypothalamic tract. It secretes. It stimulates the suprachiasmatic nuclei, and this has an effect on the pineal glands, which secretes melatonin. Melatonin, in turn, again helps us secretes GABA, which is inhibitory. So GABA, in turn, again inhibits the excitatory neurotransmitters. If we see the circadian rhythm also have an effect on the S model. So once there is bright light, and when there is morning, when a person wakes up in the morning, the light exposure inhibits the suprachiasmatic nuclei, melatonin decreases. This decreased melatonin again decreases the GABA, and then the excitatory neurotransmitters in the ascending reticular activating system gets excited, and then the person wakes up. So as I have already told, it's a very complex mechanism. Both the C process and S process in a homeostatic process goes in a cyclic manner, and that maintains our sleep and wakefulness. This slide I have taken from one of the presentations that Saurabh had sent me. So it explains beautifully that when the process C is activated, GABA is activated, and GABA in turn has inhibitory effect on the VLPO system. Again, when there is bright light, through melatonin decreases, GABA also decreases, and the sleep wake switch is put on and off in this manner.
You have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, it's my last slide. As I've already told, the zigzaggers or the stimuli which through the retinohypothalamic tract excite the suprachiasmatic or stimulates the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then melatonin is secreted, which is one of the very important hormones for maintaining, or neurotransmitter for maintaining the sleep wake process. When suprachiasmatic nucleus, apart from melatonin, it has effect on the various physiological process, the neuroendocrinal process, the autonomic process, how our appetite is controlled. And this is not part of the discussion of this seminar. So this slide basically depicts this. But one thing we need to know that melatonin, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, through the circadian rhythm, it controls the S process also, the homeostatic process. So this slide basically explains my whole presentation, how the thalamus excites the cortex through the S process and the circadian process. So this brings to the end of my presentation. Just to summarize, as I have already been telling, it's a very complex process. We have seen how various nucleus and various neurotransmitters maintains our sleep, and both the homeostatic S process, the somnogen process, and the circadian C process works in a very controlled manner in a normal physiological state, and it goes in a cyclic manner to maintain our wakefulness and sleep. And though we have a decent knowledge about the intricacies of the neurobiological basis of sleep, still much needs to be find out regarding the S process mainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Anweshak, for such a nice deliberation. Though the things are pretty complex, but I'm sure the audience must have felt that you have been able to structurally divide and simplify most of these. It's excellent, and I think whatever questions that are coming, we will be discussing that at the end of everybody's presentation, so that everyone gets some chance to do the presentation. After that, we can all take together the questions. So before we proceed further, let's welcome Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya from Bhopal, who is the EC coordinator of our sleep committee. So hello, Ruma ma'am.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for
good
joining.
to see you all.
Yeah.
And yeah, please continue this very important topic webinar. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Yeah. So let's now come to the chapter 2, where we'll be discussing about the impact of sleep on cognition. We have my very dear friend, Dr. Preranjan Avinash, representing the Central Zone of Indian Psychiatric Society. And he is currently working as an associate professor of psychiatry in Himalayan Institute of Medical Sciences, Jollygrant, Dehradun. He also works as a consultant for various online portals and is a member of the State Mental Health Authority, Uttarakhand. He also works as an expert in the draft committee for rules, regulations, minimum standards, policy draft for mental health, Uttarakhand, and is a life fellow for of Indian Psychiatric Society, Indian Association of Private Psychiatry, and Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry. Is an invited speaker at more than 40 conferences and CMEs, and also received the Early Career Psychiatrist Fellowship in 2017 from Florence, Italy, and has at least 30 papers and many chapters in peer-reviewed journals and books. So, without much more ado, I welcome Dr. Preranjan Avinash to share your screen and enlighten us all on the topic. Welcome, Avinash.
Thank you, Saurav, for such a wonderful introduction. And I also thank the Sleep Medicine Speciality section of Indian Psychiatric Society for inviting me as a speaker in today's CME. I also thank IPS office bearers, Dr. Arvinda Brahma, Sir, General Secretary of IPS, and EC Coordinator, Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya, and other speakers, and my dear colleagues and speakers and audiences. So I'll just share my screen. I hope my slides are visible. Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes, yes.
Visible,
Is
visible.
my
Right,
slide
visible.
visible?
Yes, yes, visible.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So the topic that I have been given by Saurav was to speak on sleep and cognition. Already, Dr. Anveshak has very wonderfully summarized the neurobiological understanding of how sleep occurs, how wakefulness occurs, and he has tried to cover the very complex mechanism, as he rightly said, about sleep and wakefulness. Now, my task is rather easy. I have to only speak about how sleep is related to cognition, how sleep deprivation can cause various kind of cognitive disorders, and so on and so forth. Before I start, I just wanted to quote this from Robert Stickgold. Most of you people who are working in the field of sleep medicine would know him. He has worked, he is from Harvard Medical School, and he has worked phenomenally on the field of cognition and sleep. He said that during slumber, our brain engages in data analysis from strengthening memories to solving problems. Now, that would be the background of my presentation. So, sleep is not merely resting. It protects our memories from decay. It also makes our memories more resistant to change, and it also dissects the memory and supports the most retention of only the most salient features of memory. So, how memory and the various aspects of memory, whether it is declarative memory, non-declarative memory, whether it is procedural memory, whether it is memory related to emotional cues, how all of them are understood, stored, and processed, and when it is required to be recollected, it is recollected. Almost all of this happens more robustly, if I'm allowed to say, more robustly while we are sleeping than while we are awake. This is largely already Anveshak has mentioned about the various stages of sleep, but this is largely in the different stages of sleep: the alert stage, the quiet stage, the three stages of NREM, N1, N2, and N3, and the REM stage of sleep. How various aspects of memory and cognition is related to specific stages of sleep. So, for example, the N1, N2, and N3 stage of sleep is related to encoding various memory cues. The N3 is primarily related for consolidation. So encoding happens at N1, N2, N3, all stages of NREM sleep. But the consolidation of declarative memory largely occurs in the deepest of the NREM sleep, that is N3 stage, or also called as short wave sleep. And the fine tuning of existing skills, that is the procedural memory. So the fine tuning of the procedural memory also occur at the N3 stage of the sleep. And the REM stage of sleep actually is related to various aspects of memory, including consolidation of non-declarative memory. So while declarative memory is largely a domain, if I mean, it's a simplistic, I'm saying simple, over simplistic approach I'm just giving, and then I'll be further dissecting each point further. But if you have to understand, then non-declarative memory is largely a domain of REM sleep, while declarative memory is largely a domain of NREM sleep. So the consolidation of non-declarative and emotional type of memory occurs in the REM stage, and the acquisition of novel stimulus. So while the fine tuning of existing stimuli skills occurs in the N3 stage of NREM sleep, acquisition of novel skills occurs during the REM stage of sleep. This is one slide which tells us about the various stages of sleep and how all of them are related to various parts of memory consolidation and cognition. Already Anveshak has spoken about it, so I will just omit it. Now, there is this concept called synaptic homeostatic hypothesis. So why the yellow part is the awake stage and the blue part is all the happens during sleep. So if you go back to the secondary level of our biology or science understanding, we all know the concept of entropy. Entropy means if there is a overall universe and the energy of that universe is largely constant. Okay. Similarly, for our all the memory consolidation and all the memory processing that is happening in our brain, that is also an energy utilizing behavior. You can say, or rather say, a process. So this is a process which requires a lot of energy. And you can, just to understand this, you can understand from the point of view, let's say all of our attending this meeting through our laptop. So we have a CPU in our laptop. We have certain gigabytes or of space. We can either use that space for one task or for another task. If you are using it for more than few tasks, it is possible that our laptop may just hang. Okay, why? Because the energy and the space is constant, is limited, and the data is unlimited. So what happens during our daytime while we are awake? We are using this energy and the space of our brain a lot, and too much of its use can eventually lead to altering the process of memory consolidation. So while what happens that during the sleep, there is an overall energy saving and a space saving process that happens. And during the awake time, there is energy cost and space cost saturation that occurs. So all this eventually leads to various kind of cognitive functioning that occurs during our sleep state. This is one study that
Avinash, your voice is breaking.
2005 journal. It's that one pianist who was learning and he was composing. Okay.
Avinash, just a moment. Your voice is breaking, and we didn't get to
Avinash,
hear
yeah.
last this current slide.
Is the slide currently visible?
Yes, yes,
Slide
yes.
is visible, but explain it from the beginning.
Yes, yes.
Oh, it is still at the slide has not moved.
No. We can see the nocturnal practice slide where we can see the coronal section of the brain. And you were talking
Okay,
about
yeah,
some.
you can see that, but the voice is breaking now also.
No. Now it's fine.
Okay. Probably there was a phone call that was coming, so that could have
Okay.
affected the internet.
Please go
Okay.
on.
So am I audible now? Am I audible now?
Audible,
Yes,
audible.
yes, audible.
Okay. Sorry. So this pianist who was learning a new note, composing a new note, while he was practicing it in the daytime, and when he went to sleep, the next time when he practiced the same note, his overall finger typing speed, while you are doing a piano, you are basically using your fingers to press the buttons. So the overall speed of his finger typing on the piano had increased if after the practice he went to sleep. So this also says that even a very complex task of composing a music and remembering it, and then doing the same musical note or again, which requires various stages of memory actually, procedural memory, and you have to remember certain notes. So there are certain declarative memory and everything all together. Everything seems to improve after the practice if the person goes to sleep. Now, this was another study which was done to see how various aspects of cognition, for example, psychomotor vigilance test, which checks about the vigilance, then digit symbol subtraction task, most of you are familiar with it, and serial addition and serial subtraction test. All this was done in people who were restricted, who were asked to restrict their sleep. So if you can see the slide, here there are 3 graphs, and there are 4 color codes for each of them. So the red one is for 8-hour restriction, means the person is asked to sleep for 8 hours only. The green one is 6 hours, the orange one is 4 hours, and the blue one is 0 hour. So the 0 hour was done only for 3 days, because not sleeping for more than 3 days would have been very detrimental for the subjects. But other were 8 hours, 6 hours, 4 hours were done for 2 weeks, 14 days. It was seen that the PVT lapses, the lapses in the psychomotor vigilance test was the maximum in the blue, means when you have a restriction of sleep for 3 consecutive nights, not allowed to sleep at all, you'll see the worsening of the psychomotor vigilance test. Means as you can see, these are the lapses. So his lapses keeps getting worse and worse over next 3 days. While if you see the red and the green and the orange, there is a worsening of all of this, but the worsening is different for different amount of sleep restriction. Similarly, for digital symbol substitution task and similarly for serial addition substitution task, you see the worst worsening, the worst one is definitely the blue one, when who is not allowed to sleep. And if somebody is allowed to sleep for 6 hours on consecutive days, then you see their worsening, initial worsening gets a little better over time. So their performance gets better over time. The green one, you see the 6 hours, if they're allowed to sleep for 6 hours, their score on serial addition and serial substitution test, their score on digit symbol substitution task gets a little better over time. So that means if you deprive somebody of sleep to an extreme level, their performance on various tasks which requires cognitive processing gets worse over time. This is another experiment which was done using finger tapping motor sequence task, visual discrimination task, and motor adaptation task. These are various tasks basically to check for non-declarative memory. And it was seen that the task, when they were, you see that in the graph, there are PM scores and then AM scores. The AM scores are basically after the last night's sleep. All these AM scores. You see the AM score is better for all the tasks. You see here also the green one is overnight, after overnight allowed to sleep. So the scores on the green one, if you see on all the three graphs that you see on the screen, post sleep, the scores gets better for all type of non-declarative memory, including visual discrimination task, finger tapping task, and motor adaptation task. This was another experimentation done for declarative memory, and that also showed that the role of sleep is not only in rote memorization, but also in protection of memories that are threatened by subsequent associative interference. How is it so? So the left-hand side is the rote memory, and the right-hand side, there was some interference was also done. Means he was asked to remember something, and then to interfere that memory consolidation, he was asked to do something else also. So even after the interference, the scores gets better if the person is allowed to sleep. So after the sleep, the green version is a sleep and the red one is without sleep. You see that the scores keeps getting better for all types of declarative memory, whether it is just remembering few events or words, or if it is also done with the interference. Now about the emotional memory, I said that non-declarative memory, declarative memory.
Avinash, you have less than 5 minutes left, please.
Yes, I'm about to finish now. The emotional memory, you see that here also the scores keeps getting better over time if they are allowed to sleep. So basically the gist was that all type of memory, whether it is declarative, non-declarative, emotional memory, procedural memory, all type of memory scores and performances keeps getting better over time. This was just a sleep architecture slide to show how it is different for young adult and older adult. This can be skipped. There are various classifications of sleep disorder. I can skip that as well because other people will cover it. Now, attention and working memory. You all are aware of there are two different types of network in our brain. One is called default mode network. Another is called as frontoparietal network. Now, when we are attentive, focusing at a task at hand, that is called on-task activity, our frontoparietal network is more dominant. When we are off-task activity, means we are not focusing on any specific task, then our default mode network, as you can see here, is more prominent. Now, when somebody is sleep rested, this is how it is. This is natural. But when somebody is sleep deprived, you see the robustness of frontoparietal network in the on task is not as good as in somebody who is sleep rested. Okay, on the right hand side is sleep deprived, on left hand side is sleep rested. Similarly for off task also. So somebody who is sleep deprived, their default mode network is not so robust during off task activity. Basically, it says that default mode network is very important for our attention and working memory. Now we move on to reward and other processings. You will see that over time, if somebody is not allowed to sleep, then there is increased adenosine overload with sleep deprivation, which leads to downregulation of various dopamine receptors, and this leads to increased risk-related and reward-related approach behavior. So somebody who is well rested, his risk of getting into something which is more risk-taking is less than somebody who is not so well rested. So these are the various domains of cognitive functions. On one side is normal, one side is sleep deprived. This is just a summary of all types of cognitive function that gets affected in people with sleep deprivation. You see attention and working memory that gets impaired due to, as I have already mentioned, about frontoparietal network and default mode network. About reward and incentive learning and processing, that also gets affected in sleep deprived people. About aversive stimulus processing and risk-taking behavior, that also gets affected. About memory, that gets consolidated primarily through hippocampal memory processing, which is called as long-term potentiation. That also gets affected. There is decreased long-term potentiation and there is increased long-term depression in people with sleep deprivation. Now, how various kind of sleep disorders affects cognitions, like obstructive sleep apnea. I'm sure the rest subsequent speakers will speak about it in detail. But obstructive sleep apnea affects the various functions of brain by decreasing the total amount of shortwave sleeps. And just to summarize, in various kind of hypoxic sleep disorders, where there is sleep fragmentation and hypoxia, we know that hypoxia and sleep fragmentation can lead to impairment in sustained attention and reaction time. Depressive symptoms were also independently associated with impairment in the domains of various sustained attention and various. Now I'll try to just show how Alzheimer's disease, which is a prototype of cognitive disorder, is related to a prototype of.
This will be taken up by the subsequent speakers. This Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, I can move on then. Okay. So now the last is that how various kind of sleep disorders, which is included, which is basically hypersomnia disorders, that also gets the cognition is affected. Just to summarize, the cognitive various kind of hypersomnic disorders, like central disorders of hypersomnia, you see, like for example, narcolepsy type 1 and type 2, or idiopathic hypersomnia, and on the other side is Klein-Levin syndrome. In all of this, if there is sleep deprivation, both as well as hypersomnia can affect cognition, various aspects of cognition, including concentration, attention, declarative, non-declarative, and emotional memory. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash, for such a nice presentation as always, and it was a real pleasure to listen to you after so many years. I think before we proceed further, Dr. Vijay Raghuvangshi has raised hands. Are you there, Dr. Raghuvangshi? Are you there, Dr. Raghuvangshi?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please go on.
Sir, actually, this hand only for that time. My voice are not clear for that. So.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let's just move on. So now, after Dr. Priyaranjan Avinash, we will move on to the next chapter, Modulation of Cognition in Sleep, in which Dr. Harshal Sathe will be representing the West Zone of Indian Psychiatric Society. He is currently working as an assistant professor in psychiatry in Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Sevagram, Wardha in Maharashtra. He is an MD in psychiatry from Lokmanya Tilak Municipal Medical College, Sian, Mumbai, and has also completed his DNB in psychiatry. So, warm welcome to Dr. Sathe. You can unmute yourself and start sharing the screen. We are all waiting to hear from you. Welcome, Dr. Sathe.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you're audible. But you are not visible, Dr.
So, first of all, yes.
Yes, now you are visible. Yes, now you are visible.
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to thank the Indian Psychiatric Society for considering me worthy enough for this particular. Thank you to the conveners of this. And I would like to congratulate my fellow speakers who have given excellent talks on the neurobiology of sleep.
Dr. Sathe, your voice is not audible.
This is one of the problems of webinars. Not everybody
Yes,
has had a network,
that is
good
true.
network all the time.
Yes,
Otherwise, webinars
Am
are
I,
very good.
yes,
am I
true.
audible, sir?
Dr. Harshal, we could not hear the last couple of sentences that you said. Can you please repeat? And you have to unmute yourself.
He's on a unmute. He's on a mute thing.
Yes, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. I have. Sir, am I audible now? Am I audible?
Dr. Harshal, you have to unmute yourself.
I think he is using two devices.
I have a
Says one for just showing his screen. Otherwise, he's audible in spite of being on mute.
Okay. Dr. Sathe, are you there? Hello.
Am I audible?
Dr. Harshal, you are audible, but your voice is breaking. Now it's better, I think.
Okay. So, should I share?
Yes, please share your screen.
Okay,
Please share your screen.
Yeah.
But just 1 minute. Are you simultaneously have you logged in from two devices?
I have actually connected the earphone, but now I have disconnected it. I have suppose I am audible and
Okay, like if you want, you can
visible
stop
to you?
your video. You can stop your video and just share the screen and speak so that we can hear properly. It's all right if you do that. Because if the bandwidth is low, you can.
Sir, I would like to know if I am audible and if the screen. I have already shared the screen.
Yes, your screen is visible to us now, and your audio quality is also reasonably good at the moment.
Oh, okay, sir. So I think I will proceed with the
Yes,
presentation.
please proceed. Please go on.
Okay. So a very good afternoon to all of you, to the dignitaries as well as to the audience. I am Dr. Harshal Sathe, and my topic is cognitive modulation in the of my presentation is first to just brush upon the two process model of sleep and tell its impact on the cognitive performance, to discuss the methods used in the research of cognitive modulation in the sleep, also to discuss the variation in cognitive performance across the sleep-wake cycle and what factors affect this cognitive performance. I shall also discuss in brief the implications of circadian misalignment in the sleep-wake disorder patients as well as the at-risk individuals. So let us begin with the first part.
Dr. Harshal has gone offline again, it seems.
Saurabh, you can call him and ask him to log in from only one device.
No, he says he had logged out of the other device. I've asked him that. Just let me call him. I think what Dr. Ruma ma'am is suggesting is that we should go on with the next speaker for the moment. I think it's a good idea because we are wasting time here. Dr. Ankur, are you ready? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Dr. Ankur, can you go on with the presentation? Then we can get Dr. Harshal after Sachin's yours.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay, so just give me one moment. Let me inform Dr. Harshal that we are rescheduling him. Just give me a moment, please. Okay, so just let me share the screen. Uh, due to the poor network connectivity of Dr. Harshal, we will be going on with his session after some time. So right now we'll go into chapter 4 directly on the topic of how sleep affects the risk of cognitive degeneration. We have my dear friend and colleague Dr. Ankur Sachdeva representing the North Zone of Indian Psychiatric Society. He is currently working as an associate professor in ESI Medical College, Faridabad. Has more than 10 years experience in teaching and psychiatric clinics, more than 30 research publications in various national and international journals of repute. He is also involved in various international drug trials and collaborative projects, and is also a member of the Royal College of Psychiatry, London, UK. So, without wasting any more time, let's invite Dr. Ankur and listen to him. And as always, I'm sure he will be doing extreme justice to the presentation that he's supposed to do. So, Ankur, most welcome. Please share your screen.
Right.
Yes, Ankur, you can share your. Yeah, please go on.
Yeah, is it visible?
Yes, yes, it's visible. It's visible.
Okay. Thank you, Saurabh, for introducing me. I'm sure Saurabh alone could have completed the whole webinar, but he was kind enough to invite all of us to spend some time with him. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Ankur. I'm associate professor at ESIC Medical College, Faridabad. My warm regards to all the seniors, including Dr. Arbindo and Dr. Uma, and greetings to all the fellow speakers and the listeners and the audience. I thank the Society for Sleep Medicine for inviting me to present this webinar, a brief presentation. I'd also like to thank Dr. Avinash here, who's done half of my work. The rest I'll be completing in the next some time. So I was given this topic of how sleep affects risk of cognitive degeneration. It was a very interesting topic. When I started researching for it, many of my colleagues didn't even know what that the Sleep Medicine Society existed for IPS. So there is a need to penetrate different zones of India to make people aware that this society actually exists and it is working on sleep medicine in the psychiatric domain. So when I discussed with them, I found that it is really essential to talk about sleep, considering the prevalence of insomnia that is there in the general population. And around 10% of the adults do fulfill the diagnostic criteria for insomnia, and that's a huge number, considering we give so much importance to schizophrenia, OCD, whose prevalence is even less than 1%. So one of the very well-known novelist, American novelist, Ernest Hemingway, he was also a Nobel laureate for literature. He clearly mentioned that his life tends to fall apart when he's not able to sleep. And it's a matter of chance that he actually had anxiety disorder and he committed suicide. And he one of the reasons that he was not able to sleep well. So it is to mention and it is to highlight the importance of sleep on cognition. Sleep is really important to ensure normal cognitive performance, as Dr. Avinash has earlier pointed out. And is summarizing what he's told, that sleep deprivation, it adversely affects various cognitive functions that such as working memory, attention, learning. These are the most well-researched. Some of the non-well-researched parameters include language, reasoning, impaired risk assessment, which is really important with respect to the psychiatric domains, and planning. When I say that sleep affects cognition, it is it's like saying dopamine excess leads to schizophrenia. It is true, but it is only partly true. There's very other parameters of sleep which we need to understand to know how and why does sleep affect cognitive performances. So while a person is sleeping, he tends to forget everything. And this forgetfulness is essential for consolidation of memory and other cognitive functions. And we can say it because evidence for deleterious effects of sleep loss, it demonstrates that sleep is necessary to enable normal and healthy cognitive functioning. I tried to look for studies, long-term studies, which could have found out about the deleterious effects of sleep on cognitive functions, but it was really challenging to find out good articles. And when I thought for the reasons, I could find that most of the longitudinal studies had certain challenges. The most common could be the patient selection. It is difficult to select which age group, which gender, and people who are educated or not. What should be the proper follow-up duration for such studies? There are various confounding factors like physical and mental health issues prevalent in almost every second or third person. What should be the adequate sample size considering such a large prevalence? Ethical issues. Should we continue follow-up without intervention when we clearly know that sleep deprivation, it does cause cognitive problems, or should we intervene? And reversibility of cognitive problems, even if sleep does cause that. The challenges in retrospective studies I could come up with would be the reporting bias by the participants. There's no proper way to ensure how much sleep do they get. Participation bias and effect of comorbidities that could have already been present in the last few years. Still, there were some good studies, good researches that came up. One of them, I've mentioned only the most important ones. So one of them was a huge study, a huge cohort follow-up for about 20,000 patients. That's a huge number. They were from two population, one from Chinese cohort and one from English cohort. They were followed up from ranging from 4 to 8 years, and they found out that people who sleep less than 4 years, less than 4 hours or more than 10 hours, both of them were at more risk of cognitive problems compared to the people who slept on average and accepted duration, that is 7 hours. So it mentioned that their sleep declined faster than the reference group. The next slide, it shows one of the studies. All of these are recent studies, if I may mention, 2017 and beyond. So one of the recent studies had mentioned that sleep duration in middle and old age, it increases the risk of dementia. It was a 25-year follow-up study where they started following the patients at the age of 25 years, 35 years, and 45 years. They followed them up for the next 25 years. And they found that persistent short sleep duration, it increases the risk of dementia by 30%. So that's a very significant finding. And it's essential because we usually think that cognitive difficulty is set up while the age is increasing. However, this study found out that the maximum risk was in the age group of 25 years, then 35 years, and then 45 years age group. So it is really essential. There could be different reasons for that, and I'll be discussing that later on. One important Chinese study, the Shanghai Aging Study of 2021, it also mentions or it found out that people who sleep before 9, they had higher risk of cognitive decline or higher risk of dementia than people who go to bed between 9 and 11 p.m. Later bedtime, more than after 11 p.m., it also had increased risk of dementia, but that was not significant. So if I have to summarize, I'd say that according to this study, a sleep time of 9 to 11 p.m. is best to avoid progression of dementia, and sleep time of before 9 p.m. it poses a higher risk of dementia as compared to other times. One meta-analysis important meta-analysis. It tried to look into different factors of sleep that could affect cognitive decline or dementia. Uh, if you could, just focus your attention on the last few lines. It mentions that the 4 components of insomnia, they were associated with 7 to 16%.
Ankur, sorry to interrupt you. The entire slide is not visible, I think.
The slide is not visible?
It's visible, but the lower part is not visible. But you can speak. That's all right.
Is the figure 3 mentioned? The lines written in the red box?
Yes, the figure 3 we can see. The lower ones we cannot. No, now it's visible. Okay.
It's visible. Okay. All right. So if everyone can see, so it mentions that these 4 components of insomnia, namely this daytime dysfunction, inefficiency during the next day, fragmentation of sleep, and increased sleep latency, it increased the risk of cognitive disorders by 7 to 16%. And it's all the follow-up data from the review studies and meta-analysis. The next chart here, it shows that 4 types of sleep disorders, namely the REM sleep behavioral disorders, sleep apnea, longer time in bed, and habitual napping. It increased the risk of cognitive disorders compared to other sleep problems like RLS and sleep behavior disturbances. So it is important for us to know and to be aware of these particular fragments of sleep that we need to target in people who are having these particular problems. So I was curious to know what could have been the possible mechanisms of cognitive impairment while the sleep is affected. So the most common and most researched thing I could find was that patients who had sleep difficulties, it also affected their beta amyloid clearance, and it could be one of the possible reasons why they are more predisposed to dementia, particularly the Alzheimer's type. So one of the theories is that sleep deprivation, it causes excessive neuronal excitability, which results in increased beta amyloid accumulation. Also, short sleep duration, it leads to reduced function of lymphatic system. It's an important system which removes toxins from the brain, which are usually associated with neurodegenerative diseases such as amyloid. And it ultimately leads to reduced clearance of amyloid proteins and increased deposition of amyloid proteins in the brain. One important thing is that when the circadian rhythm is affected and sleep pattern is disturbed, even in cognitively normal individuals, the evidence suggests in such individuals also there is increased accumulation of amyloid proteins. So all of these mechanisms in toto, they could lead to reduced beta amyloid clearance and increased deposition, thereby increasing the risk for dementia, particularly Alzheimer's type. The second theory I could come up in different researches was the cortical thinning. It has been researched and established that sleep disturbances, it has been linked to cortical thinning, and cortical thinning in itself is a marker for many dementia subtypes. One important study, it followed patients for around an average of 8 years, and the average duration was patients' average age of patients was around 60 to 65 years. It mentioned that self-reported sleep duration of 6 hours or less or 8 hours or more, that is short or long sleep duration, it was associated with more rapid cortical thinning in frontal and temporal regions as compared to the controls. And it has been noted in different MRI and DTI studies that patients who have shorter sleep duration, their ventricular sizes have been found to be large, which similarly reflects loss of brain volumes from the cortical areas. The third and the most in fashion or most research currently topic is the hippocampal degeneration. particularly the areas around dentate gyrus and cornu-amnois, CA1 and CA2 regions, importantly. So dentate gyrus, as we know, it's part of hippocampus and plays an important role both in cognition and emotion. So sleep has been proposed to regulate the generation of new dentate gyrus neurons during adulthood. That is the hippocampal neurogenesis, basically. And sleep affects hippocampal degeneration by directly inducing or being affected by epigenetic modifications of gene expressions through other factors. When I say other factors, so many intrinsic and extrinsic factors like drugs, diet, inflammation, physical activities, stress and trauma, all these factors, they regulate neurogenesis via epigenetic modifications that either facilitate or suppress the expression of particular genes. Mechanisms include DNA methylation, histone modification, chromatin remodeling, and there can be multiple other factors. So sleep, it can directly affect the epigenetic modifications, or it can affect all these factors that I've mentioned, like diet, inflammation, physical activity, stress. So it can indirectly affect neurogenesis.
Dr. Ankur, you have less than 5 minutes left.
Yes, just 2-3 slides left. So evidence indicates that chronic sleep deprivation, sleep restriction, fragmentation, or specific REM sleep disorders, they reduce adult dentate gyrus neurogenesis. It disturbs hippocampal signaling pathways, impairs plasticity, and disrupts the consolidation of hippocampal dependent memories that have been mentioned by the earlier speakers. One important and new theories that has been come up is that hippocampal degeneration, it is neurogenesis is also affected by changes in certain genes, certain core clock genes such as MPER2 and MBML1, which is important for maintaining circadian rhythm. So disturbances in circadian rhythm may also affect expression of these genes, thereby affecting neurogenesis. This is basically the same slide. So the other is that how sleep apnea can lead to increased risk of dementia or vascular dementia. So sleep apnea has been related with loss of regional volume and white matter integrity in the hippocampus, cingulate cortex, and some cerebral regions. And sleep disordered breathing, it's also a risk factor for developing cerebrovascular pathology. Also, OSA is an independent risk factor for stroke, bradycardia, PSVT, ventricular tachycardia, which all are important independent risk factors of dementia. 3 important inflammatory and growth markers like insulin-like growth factors, which has been promoted to link to neurogenesis, has been found to be reduced in quantity in sleep deprived animals. BDNF, it's also found to be reduced after even 48 hours of sleep deprivation. And certain inflammatory markers like IL-6 and TNF-alpha have been found to be high in patients who have sleep deprivation and could be related to reduced neurogenesis. And it basically summarizes how sleep deprivation through different means like OSA, hypoxia, can lead to oxidative stress, inflammation, endothelial damage, and reduce amyloid beta clearance, and ultimately lead to cognitive problems like Alzheimer's or vascular dementia. So there are some important references I've mentioned, but it's a lot more that I've taken from. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Ankur, for such a nice presentation, very much evidence-based and scientific. And I'm sure the audience must have loved it, and at least they have understood that there are a lot of research that's going on in the field of cognition and sleep. So thank you so much, Dr. Ankur. Let's just move on to the next part of the presentation. Ankur, you have to stop the screen sharing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we will now move on to the next chapter, like how cognitive degeneration affects sleep. So basically, till now, we were trying to find out how the sleep works. how how lack of sleep or sleep disruption causes immediate changes in cognition, and how chronic sleep deprivation leads to long-term changes in cognition. Also, how the sleep deprivation and various other factors or disorders of sleep, they affect the risk of cognitive degeneration or dementia. Now we will try to understand how cognitive degeneration actually affects sleep. To enlighten us on the matter, we have Dr. Sachin BS, representing the South Zone of Indian Psychiatric Society. He is currently working as an associate professor of psychiatry in SDM College of Medical Sciences and Hospital, SDM University, Dharwad, and is also his areas of interest are substance use disorders, sexual medicine, and bipolar disorders. I'm sure Sachin will do extreme justice to the topic that's given to him. So let's just invite Dr. Sachin. Sachin, please start sharing your screen. Most welcome.
Yeah, very good morning to all of you. It's almost good afternoon. Okay, it's been a quite long session, all the speakers who gave. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Indian Psychiatric Society and the Subspeciality Sleep Medicine for giving me this opportunity. Without much delay, I will directly go to the topic. As we know, we had been through the basics, sleep and cognition, and how cognition can affect, sleep can affect cognition. There is one topic I think which missed, we will come back. It's going to be a very short presentation, mine. Yeah. So the topic is how cognitive degeneration can affect sleep. Okay, we all know there are many other factors which can affect sleep. So looking at the one of the most important factors which we see when I was going through one of the article, you can see the sleep disturbances are common in dementia, and which affects almost 25 to 80% of the patients depending on the dementia subtype. It is not a very small proportion of patients with dementia developing. It's a very huge. And remember, the most reason why many persons with dementia which are brought to the hospitalization is because of the sleep disturbances. And you look at the different variants. These slides give all the different types of basic dementia. You can see dementia of Lewy body, Parkinson's dementia, multisystem atrophy, progressive supranuclear palsy, corticobasal degeneration. Then comes vascular dementias. Then we have frontotemporal variant dementias. Then the most common is Alzheimer's dementia and other mixed types. So if you look at the, I will try to take off this. Yeah, if you look at the the sleep related symptoms you see in different types of dementia, this table actually gives a very simple and direct, straightforward understanding of what are the different types of sleep disorders. You see in Alzheimer's dementia, up to 25 to 50% have sleep problems, which are predominantly irregular sleep-wake rhythm, which includes changes in the chronobiological changes, which are due to the degeneration of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and also the pineal gland and the nuclear related to the pineal gland, which is mainly responsible for secreting the melatonin. Then you see sundowning phenomena, or what we call it as a kind of alteration in the sensorium as the day progresses toward the evening. And one of the reasons could be possible obstructive sleep apnea related syndromes. And in dementia Lewy bodies, you can see 85% of the individuals have sleep problems, which includes the rapid eye REM behavioral disorders, that rapid eye movement behavioral disorders, then hypersomnia, then periodic leg movement syndrome. Then again, here also you see irregular sleep-wake rhythm cycle. And even in Parkinson's dementia, up to 90%, which is quite a significant number. You need to know here also you can see rapid eye movement behavioral disorders, sleep maintenance insomnia, hypersomnia, restless leg syndrome, and multisystem atrophy, which includes Streight-Drager syndrome or striatonigral degeneration. There also you see a lot of patients who develop 70% up to REM behavioral disorders, then nocturnal stridor, autonomic dysregulation. And people with PSP, you can see they develop predominantly insomnia, hypersomnia, and RBD. Whereas in vascular dementia, the most common sleep disturbance which you see is obstructive sleep apnea. These are the main things which we need to remember. One thing is you see in all the major dementias, be it Alzheimer's, dementia, Lewy body, Parkinson's related, you see there are significant proportion of the people who do suffer from different type of sleep related problems. I'm not able to move my slide. Yes. Yeah, this is where I was just trying to highlight. Then moving on to the sleep-related movement disorders, which are the most common seen. You can see, as I mentioned, restless leg syndrome or Willis-Ekbom syndrome is the one which is commonly seen in these individuals, where the predominant symptoms are they have overwhelming urge to move the legs, they'll have unpleasant sensations, and these usually start getting worse in the night and relieved by movements. Until unless the person do not have those movements, they will not feel little comfortable. And it is associated definitely sleep disturbance and involuntary jerky movements during the sleep. And periodic movement disorders, which includes both periodic leg movement disorder and sleep disturbance, which cause daytime disturbance. You can see this has got autonomic dominant, and it's a more of sensory motor disorder, which almost occurs in 2012, 2 to 11% across in different studies in all the dementing individuals. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. Next is parasomnias. As I mentioning, the REM sleep behavioral disorders or RBD, which we saw these are seen even in Alzheimer's dementia up to 50%, in dementia of Lewy body up to 85%, and in other Parkinson's also you have to see 90%. So it is characterized by, you can see there's a loss of normal skeletal atonia during the REM sleep with predominant motor activity, and this is where the individuals start having, they spend most of their sleep with a lot of dreams coming, which affects their sleep very significantly. And one of the main reasons for this is because of the neurodegenerative process secondary to the underlying dementing illness itself. And another thing is, many times it happens so that we do use a lot of antidepressants or antipsychotic medications or other psychotropic medications to treat certain behavioral problems in persons with dementia, can lead to this one, REM sleep behavior disorders has been found in many studies. You can see the prevalence is up to 0.5% in general. Definitely it is more in people with neurodegenerative conditions like dementia, more commonly in synucleinopathies, Parkinson's, multisystem atrophy, dementia with Lewy body, as I mentioned. Okay, and many times it happens so that this can manifest before the onset of dementia. Many times the REM sleep disorders can manifest much earlier than the dementing process itself. And this is where you can see, I will just show, yeah, these are the areas of the brain where you can see the degenerative process leading to different types of sleep disturbances or the RBD. You can see in the picture BCD, where there is a demyelination in the pontine lesion. This is a 51-year-old female. There are some images which are removed because of the paucity of the time. And in the second, there is a surgical procedure which has been done on the pontine, which is this part. Okay. So, and the third one is there is an ischemic lesion in the left upper pons. This is this one. So, in all these studies, it is very clearly depicted is the degenerative process affecting the brainstem is definitely is one of the reasons for the sleep disturbance. As we heard from one of our first presenter, the reticular activity system, which is definitely present in the brainstem, and these are the parts of the brainstem which includes pontine, okay, nuclei and other, can lead to sleep disturbance significantly. And here it is very clearly you can see, if you look at these nuclei, red nucleus, the ventrolateral pre-equidoctal gray matter, then subcoruleus, then ventromedial medulla and motor neurons. There has been significant finding found that whenever there is a atrophy or degeneration of the red nucleus, what actually this red nucleus do is during the REM active, you can see during the REM sleep, REM active glutamagic the subleucocilious neurons trigger REM sleep paralysis through activation of the GABAergic nucleus in the VMM, which is ventrolateral periactive gray matter. Okay, this which carry inhibitor projections of skeletal neurons under the normal REM conditions. So whenever there is a degeneration of this activity gets disturbed, and there won't be much inhibition of the inhibitory action of the GABAergic neurons, which lead to sleep disturbances. So in RBD, that is REM, sleep behavior disorder, degeneration of the subcortical leading to BMM circuit occurs. And the next comes is irregular sleep-wake rhythm disorders, otherwise called as circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders, which are very common, which includes delayed sleep-wake phase disorder. There can be delay in the sleep-wake cycle, advancement of the sleep-wake, or it can be irregular sleep-wake rhythm, then non-24-hour sleep-wake rhythm disorder, shift worker disorder, jet lag disorders, and circadian sleep-wake disorders not otherwise specified, which can be grouped into alteration in the circadian timekeeping system. These are seen. Then misalignment between the endogenous rhythm and external environment. Usually we see in people who are traveling repeatedly across the different time zones, and also people working on shift basis. And this is where the brief description of delayed means the most usually familiar genetic and usually onset in adolescence and earlier adulthood. Advanced is you see in the late adulthood. Most of the elderly people, they do come say have a little difficulty in getting sleep. Sometimes I sleep early, but I get up very early. And this non-24-hour, that's very free running. They will have, irrespective of the day or night, they'll have a sleep disturbance which is found. And definitely irregular sleep wake cycle as undefined. So with this, I'll just conclude my presentation. In brief, I have not talked much about the neurobiological aspect in detail. The most commonly seen disorders are rapid eye movement behavioral disorders, irregular sleep wake rhythm, and also the parasomnias, which are again a part of it, and the periodic leg movement disorders, which are both due to the degenerative process itself and also the medications which use. Probably the treatment aspect takes little longer time, so I'm not going into that. Thank you for giving this opportunity.
Thank you.
I made my presentation very short and crisp. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sachin, for maintaining time in the best possible manner. And just to summarize Dr. Sachin's presentation, what has happened is that once the chronic sleep deprivation leads to certain brain changes, and we do develop some kind of cognitive deficits, which can be up to above the threshold of, say, dementia or say any other that kind of neurodegenerative disease per se, then the disease process itself affects certain brain structures, mostly in the reticular activating system, brainstem, also in certain areas of the subcortical gray matter, which does again give rise to some independent sleep disorders. So Dr. Sachin has very nicely mentioned about the REM behavior disorder, which is a type of parasomnia in which the connectivity, like when we sleep normally during the REM sleep, there is a muscle atonia, or there is disconnect between whatever the cortex is doing and thinking versus that signal is not being transmitted to our skeletal muscle system. So we can just have the meditation in our dreams and we do not act upon it. Now, due to these underlying degenerative processes in the brain, this disconnect gets lost. That is, the connection persists, and thereby the person starts enacting the things in dreams. And another one is, as Dr. Sachin has very nicely mentioned, is periodic limb movement disorder. It is again acts in the same region which gets disrupted by the cognitive degeneration process itself, and it causes an urge to move the legs, or the person actually moves the legs. And there is a very difficult sensation which happens mostly at rest and as nighttime approaches or evening approaches. So that is one that we get very common in elderly people. And the why it is important, because often we get these degenerative patients, like we see elderly patients, dementia patients in our routine psychiatry practice, and we see that they're complaining of sleep, like, doctor, I cannot fall asleep. So what we do, usually we prescribe some sleeping pills, but that is not the idea. Why? Because and having a cognitive degeneration can predispose the person, as Dr. Sachin has very nicely mentioned, to very specific, significant independent sleep disorders like periodic limb movement, like RBT. So if we just prescribe a sleeping pill, it will not work, because we have to find out the underlying pathology and then treat accordingly. Also, the circadian, see, for example, the person is sleeping very early, waking up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., say, and they're saying that I am waking up very early, I'm not having sleep. But we have to ask that, when are you actually going to bed? When are you falling asleep? When are you waking up? We'll see that the person is sleeping for 7 to 8 hours in the night, but it is very early in the night and is waking up in the early morning. So in the middle of the night, basically. So there are various kinds of things that can like mimic various, like, say, sleep problems, but they are individual primary sleep disorders that can be presented in various kind of cognitive dysfunctions. Thank you so much, Sachin, for your such a nice and crisp presentation. Now let's move on to the next part of
Thank
the
you, sir.
presentation. Let's revisit Dr. Harshal Sathe, chapter 3, discussing on the modulation of cognition in sleep. Dr. Harshal Sathe will be presenting the West Zone, and he is currently the assistant professor in psychiatry in Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Sevagram, Wardha, in Maharashtra. Dr. Sathe, please start sharing your slide. Most welcome.
Thank you, sir, for especially for bearing in this a little bit of cognitive, this little bit of technical glitches. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are audible, Harshal.
Please pardon me. I'm just trying to open the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you. Is the presentation audible? Is the visible to you?
No, not yet. You have to
Is the
share the
screen visible?
screen. No, you have to share the screen, Harshal.
I hope it is visible now, sir.
Yes. It's visible, Harshal. Yes.
Okay. So my topic is cognitive modulation in sleep. The objectives of this presentation is to just brush upon the two-process model of sleep and its impact on cognitive performance. I will discuss in brief the methods which are used in research of cognitive modulation in sleep. I will actually discuss what variations happen in cognitive performance in the sleep-wake cycle and also the factors affecting it. And lastly, the practical implications of today's discussion. So we have already discussed this two-process model of sleep given by Alexander Borbly. And basically, I'll just show this with the use of this graph. In the graph, you will see a blue line, which is the homeostatic sleep drive.
Dr. Harshal, your slides are not moving. Your slide, yeah, now it's moving. Okay.
Okay.
And you have to make it full screen, please.
Okay. Is it moving, sir, now?
You have to
Are the
put it
slides
in the
moving?
slideshow mode, Dr. Harshal.
No, wait. You can see there is a small square button in the right lower side of the page.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just click it and it will become full screen, like slideshow mode. Yes, that one, correct.
Is it full screen now, sir?
Not yet.
For me, it has become full screen.
And then I think it will. You can continue, Dr. Harshal. You can continue.
Okay. Is it full screen now?
Not yet, but you can go on, Dr. Harshal.
Okay, I'll go with the same mode. Okay. So basically, the two-process model of the sleep was described by Alexander Borbly, and here you can see that there are two processes. First is represented by the blue line. It is the homeostatic sleep drive. When an individual wakes up at 7 a.m., his tendency to fall asleep goes on increasing throughout the day. it reaches the threshold, and after that he goes into sleep. In the sleep, his tendency to fall asleep, or we call it as a sleep pressure, it dissipates. Whereas there is another process which is simultaneously active. In this process, which is basically neurohormonal, it is governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the brain. In this process, the arousal increases progressively throughout the day, peaks somewhere during afternoon to evening time, and then it begins to fall during the biological night. At one particular threshold point, when the sleep pressure is maximum, the individual tends to fall asleep, and we call this as the sleep guilt. This is basically the two-process model given by Alexander Borbley. Now, this two-process model does not only determine what is the sleep and wake time, but it also determines the cognitive process, cognitive performance of the individual. The cognitive performance of the individual based on these two processes varies across the day. And this variation is termed as cognitive modulation, which we are discussing today. This cognitive modulation is impacted by the inter-individual variations such as age, sex, chronotype, and some task characteristics of the cognitive task which we are giving to the individual also have an impact on this two-process model. Before we delve into what exactly will be the changes in the cognitive performance, we will just discuss how the research in this particular protocol, what protocols we apply while researching the two-process theory and its impact on the cognitive performance. So we use a napping protocol. In this, the individual is given brief cycles of wakefulness and sleep. So he is awake for 13 minutes and he sleeps for 7 minutes. And such cycles are repeated for the period of 36 to 40 hours. What happens is, when he is going through these cycles, the sleep pressure almost never builds up. And this eliminates the homeostatic process completely. And that is why the polysomnography, which is being continuously done, we do the measurement of actual sleep time as well as we assess the sleep stages. Cognitive functions are assessed at baseline and during the awake time during the entire napping protocol. So in this protocol, we measure the circadian rhythm of the individual. We actually measure the impact of process C on the cognitive function. The second process is the forced desynchrony protocol. In this, the individual is given unusually long sleep-wake cycle. The original sleep-wake cycle of 24 hours hence gets decoupled when the individual is asked to sleep for 9 hours and be awake for 18 hours. The decoupling puts the process C on a free run, and the cognitive tasks can be given to the individual, and the differential impact of the process C and process S, that is the homeostatic process, can be measured. The detailed discussion of these two protocols is out of the scope of current discussion, but we must understand that forced desynchrony protocol helps us to determine the impact of both processes on the cognitive task, whereas the napping protocol helps us to define the impact of only one process, that is process C, circadian process, on the cognitive task. Now, having discussed this protocol, let us actually look the impact of how the cognitive modulation happens throughout the sleep process. Now, in front of you, you will see a graph. On the x-axis, there is cognitive performance, and on the y-axis, there is the clock hours during the day. So we can see that after the nap, you will see this small severed line. This line actually represents the sleep inertia, which is the grogginess at the beginning of the sleep episode. When we wake up, the cognitive function is slightly on a lower side. But then the cognitive function recovers in the matter of 15 to 20 minutes, and then it goes on during the waking time. But if we look, this is the impact of the homeostatic sleep drive, independent impact of the homeostatic sleep drive on the cognition. So it will go on reducing, as in the homeostatic sleep drive, the sleep pressure keeps increasing throughout the day. So there is a downward trend in the cognitive performance throughout the day. That is, during the evening time or so, the cognitive performance declines, which is driven by the homeostatic sleep drive. But there is a competing process at the same time, which is the circadian arousal. Circadian arousal in the morning time is on a lower side, but it gradually goes on increasing in the afternoon, and it peaks in the afternoon and evening time. So we can see that when the cognition is low because of the homeostatic sleep drive, at around the same time, this is compensated by the circadian arousal mechanism of the brain. So cognition is maintained on a higher level throughout the day by these two competing processes. And after at one particular point in the night, which is the sleep time, it falls and the individual is able to sleep. So in this graph, I am showing the differential impact of the two processes on the cognition. In this graph, these processes have summed up. So the cognitive performance is initially a little bit low because of the sleep inertia. This peak you see is because of the low sleep pressure, which corresponds to this particular portion of the previous graph. It is mainly because of the low sleep pressure. But the circadian arousal has not happened properly till now, and the sleep pressure goes on increasing. So there is a little bit of afternoon slump in the cognitive performance over here, and the cognitive performance again picks up in the afternoon and the evening time, and it maintains so till the sleep time. So the competing two processes have their impact on fluctuation of cognitive performance throughout the day. And the whole point is, it is important to understand these cognitive peaks so that the further performance of the individual through his work life or in his education is can be particularly studied. Now let us look at, this is the cognitive modulation of the sleep. Now let us look at what are the factors which actually affect this cognitive modulation of the sleep. So first are the phenotypic factors: age, sex, chronotype, and sleep length. Now, when the child is born, he sleeps for a longer duration of time. His homeostatic sleep drive and circadian rhythm are gradually developing. So by the time he reaches an adolescent age, there is a significant delay in his sleep phase. So studies show that adolescents have a delayed sleep phase as compared to childhood. But as the age advances further, and especially in the old age, the sleep phase is significantly advanced. So the older people tend to sleep early as well as wake up early. Women tend to have a more advanced sleep phase, that is, they tend to sleep early and wake up early generally as compared to the males. Based on the social learning and based on the genetic makeup as well, the individuals tend to be divided into the morning type or the evening type individual. These are called as chronotypes. Morning type people will sleep early and wake up early and will show better performance levels in the morning time and in the afternoon time. Whereas the evening type people will be opposite. Their performance peak will be more in the afternoon and evening time. Same goes with the sleep length. There are short sleepers who sleep for about 6 to 8 hours in a day, whereas long sleepers can sleep up to 9 to 10 hours. And depending on the sleep length, the cognitive performance peaking will vary. So the phenotypic factors affect the cognitive performance of the individual, and similarly, there are some genes which also have an impact. There is a human period gene on chromosome 1, and the long allele variant of this gene determines the morningness, that is, the tendency to sleep early and wake up early. We all aware that coffee inhibits adenosine. So coffee in a way is an alerting this thing. It inhibits adenosine deaminase. This adenosine deaminase gene is located on chromosome 20, and its heterozygous allele will reduce the activity of this enzyme and thereby promote alertness. BDNF and COMT are other genes which may have impact on the cognitive modulation in the sleep. Now, till now, we have discussed what cognitive modulations happen in the sleep and what are the factors which affect this cognitive modulation in the sleep. But the main crux of this discussion is that different individual will have difference in their cognitive performance based on their genetic makeup or based on their phenotype or based on their environment. And that is why their cognitive peaking should coincide with their work schedule or should coincide with their study schedule, so that the optimal performance can be ensured. However, this balance is disturbed in some clinical illnesses as well as by virtue of some professions. So let us discuss the clinical implications in short. We have already discussed that there is a delayed sleep phase disorder and there is an advanced sleep phase disorder. In the delayed sleep phase disorder, which is usually seen in adolescents, they tend to sleep late and wake up very late. Now, adolescents usually have school early in the morning. I remember that my school used to start early at about 7 a.m. in the morning. Just imagine if I have a delayed sleep phase, which is seen in a significant amount of adolescents, also those who do not have this disorder, I will be having, my cognition will be pretty low during the school hours, and that it will be a challenge and my performance may drop. Similarly, advanced sleep phase disorder is seen in older adults, and in these older adults they will find it very difficult to go into to do the social task or cognitive tasks which are scheduled during the evening time, because at that time their cognition shows a slump. Their cognition is mainly good in the morning and the afternoon time. There will be a problem with shift work disorder people, like the nurses or the residents, medical residents or the transport personnel. They have to keep changing their shift very frequently, and as a result they find it very difficult to sleep when they get a free time, because when they were working it was their biological sleep time. In this disorder also, the cognitive performance will show a drop, and there is an increased risk of mood problems, increased risk of mistakes, increased risk of accidents. In jet lag, the circadian misalignment is prominent, and this will have an adverse impact on cognitive performance. And in non-24-hour type of this thing, which is usually seen in blind individuals, where the circadian clock fails to enter into the 24-hour day, there also we will see a lot of cognitive performance decline in the day-to-day practice. All these disorders will have an adverse impact on the cognitive performance of the individual, and the cognitive modulation during the sleep must be taken into account while treatment of these disorders. Apart from the disorders, practically also we see that especially in the Indian setting, the schools are very early, or most of the workplaces they start early in the morning. Now, what happens if when they start early, a large chunk of students who have the tendency to keep sleeping till 7 or 8 p.m., they will have to wake very early, let us say at 5 p.m., 5 or 5:30 or 6, they will have to wake up. And when by the time they reach the school, their cognition has not picked up, their cognitive performance have not picked up. And as a result, there will be a problem in the school performance, which will have a secondary impact on their grades, and on their mental health status, and sometimes it has been shown that their attendance rates are also poor. So delaying the school timings a little bit may have a beneficial impact on the cognition of these delayed sleep phase student. And anyways, the students who are able to wake up early, their cognition is still intact in the afternoon time. So having the school timings which are a little bit late might help. So it is one of the practical implications of the discussion of this cognitive modulation. Similarly, for the emergency medical and safety personnel, the people who are doing transportation, the people who are military personnel, in them also this circadian misalignment can result in serious accidents and strategies. So the treatment of these conditions as well as the proper entrainment is extremely important if we have to improve the output and prevent the accidents. A last word about light therapy. Light therapy basically works by improving or entraining the circadian rhythm. In the eye, there is a ganglion cell layer from which the impulse is transmitted to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. In the light therapy, which is we use 10,000 to 10,000 lux of the light given 30 minutes every day, it has shown to improve the alertness and cognitive function. And in sleep phase disorders, it is used. In advanced sleep phase disorders, the light therapy is used in evening time, and in delayed sleep phase disorder, it is used in the morning time to make the necessary corrections. But because of this studied impact of light therapy on improvement in the cognitive performance, the light therapy is also being researched in the Alzheimer's disease. So, at the end of the presentation, my take-home message is that proper alignment between wakefulness and sleep timing is critical for maintaining the optimal functioning and safety, and that the disturbed circadian and sleep physiology contribute to the impaired cognitive function in sleep-wake disorder patient as well as in the healthy individuals. These are my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Harshal, for enlightening us on the very relevant and important topics of cognitive peak and how the various professions impact the cognition. And it is very important that you had mentioned very correctly that this present school timings of children that we have to drag them out of the bed before 6 a.m. and send them to school, and they are all groggy and drowsy trying to understand what is happening and what is being taught about with the teachers. I mean, I myself have two small children, and I also sincerely believe, in fact, the evidence also says the same thing, that schools should start a little bit late so that they can attend the learning in a stage where they have a maximum amount of focus and learning ability. So thank you, Dr. Harshal. And before we finish the session, I would like to add just a couple of slides on in this same context. I hope they are visible. Okay, so just bear with me for 2 slides only, because there are some undergoing research which is trying to understand that if we do certain activity during our sleep, can we better the cognition? Is there any way to improve the cognition by modulating certain aspects of sleep? Am I actually, Dr. Harshal, can you mute your mic because there is some background noise coming? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so basically, what we are trying to do, they have tried to do is to find out if giving some stimulus or doing some activity while a person is sleeping, whether it improves the cognition next day. What they have done certain experiments. Like, for example, there were a few subjects who had learned card pair locations in the presence of an order. Like, we can see here this chart, there are multiple boxes, and these two are similar, having in a different location. And while the cards are presented to them, they were given certain orders. And then when the persons were sleeping, and it was being recorded with a polysomnography, there was the same order. Like there were two groups. One group was given the same order when the person was having a slow wave sleep or deep sleep or N3 sleep, that is the same thing. And the other group were given an orderless vehicle. Now, the next morning when they tried to recall the card pair location, it was seen that those who were given the same order during the stimuli as well as during the slow wave sleep, they have a much better recall of the card pair locations. So basically what happened was that there was memory consolidation during the slow wave sleep, and since there was a particular order that was given both during the primary learning experience as well as during the slow wave sleep specifically, they had a much better learning, and they were better you can say cortical placement of those memories. And it was also subsequently proved by doing this fMRI scans, which showed that there was more slow wave sleep related activated hippocampal regions in the left anterior hippocampus, as shown in this picture. It was shown that this kind of behavior did activate the hippocampi much more when the order was presented during the slow wave sleep. So this is one experiment. Another similar kind of experiment that was done was that it was shown that like stimulating slow oscillations during sleep enhances memory. What did they do? They now started learning word pairs and also finger sequence tapping. So what pairs is declarative memory, finger sequence tapping is non-declarative memory, and the subjects received electrical stimulation of slow oscillations via the TDCS, basically transcranial direct current stimulation of 0.75 hertz during ensuing sleep. Now the subjects were given word pairs to learn, and they were given finger sequence tests to learn. And when they fell asleep, they were given TDCS current during the sleep, very low frequency. Now compared, and it was compared to another group which was given a sham, like no current was actually given. And it was seen that on the next morning, those who were given the TDCS current, they had a better learning of the word pair association, that is declarative memory, compared to the other sham group who did not receive the current. But on the other hand, regarding the finger sequence task or non-declarative memory, both of the groups who either received the current or not received the current did not have any change in the learning process. So basically, it shows that giving TDCS during the sleep, it helps to improve on the declarative memory and learning. And in fact, there was some news article which came a few weeks back, or I think a few months back, which showed that there are some high flying executives in the US. They are actually trying to do TDCS on themselves to improve their functioning and productivity on a regular basis. So research is yet to say that whether it is a right practice or wrong practice, but these things are happening worldwide. So with this, I would like to conclude all the sessions here, and I would like to open the forum for any discussion and questions. I think there is one question on the chat box from respected Professor Dr. Prasant Kumar Das, who had asked that how sleep is correlated with cognitive function in respect of post-COVID insomnia patients. So I think this can be taken up by Dr. Avinash or Dr. Ankur. Who will volunteer?
Okay, I will volunteer first.
Yeah, great. Please go on.
About the post-COVID, I don't know, the clinical aspect of various kind of sleep disorders seen in post-COVID. There are many research that you must have seen in last few years, almost most of the scientific journals about long COVID primarily. And long COVID is a very generic term which includes various kind of dysfunctions, cognitive dysfunctions, mood disorders, sleep disorders all together. But about the sleep part, what has been studied has been mostly that the slow wave sleep, the N3 sleep, and the REM sleep, that has been found to be the most dysfunctional. If we can generalize, I mean, there are many different studies, but broadly these are the two prominent findings that have been seen. That one, the total amount of time spent in N3, as well as the REM sleep. Gets a little from long COVID sleep disorders. And as in my presentation and in subsequent other presentations also, I'm sure, we have mentioned that a majority of the memory consolidation, especially the non-declarative memory and other aspects of cognition occurs primarily in N3 and in REM sleep. So if that both these things could be clubbed together, then I believe that post-COVID long COVID sleep disorders would lead to various kind of memory problems, primarily related to non-declarative memory and consolidation of skills that you learn. So I think that's what you are going to see as far as cognition is concerned.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash. Now, Dr. Ankur, would you like to add something to what Dr. Avinash said?
I think he summarized more of it. But yes, this question was coming up mostly when the COVID was ongoing. There were people who had trouble sleeping, and at that time, most of it was being attributed to disturbances in circadian rhythm, lack of activity, and all these stuff. So I remember we were asking specific questions to which medicine to give, and we were always getting the response that melatonin was the one which had to be used for COVID-associated sleep disturbances. So one of the attributions could be disturbance in circadian rhythm, but that was when it was ongoing and the people were inside, they were not moving out much. But yes, later on, what Dr. Avinash had summarized, I think it's more or less the same.
Thank you, Thank you so much. And now there is another question in the chat. Just give me a moment. Let me find it out. Yep. Dr. Arunangshu Poddar from Calcutta has asked how to approach a case of insomnia. I think Dr. Anveshak will be able to answer that very nicely. Anvesh, are you there? Dr. Anvesh?
Yeah, Saurabh.
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like to answer this question? Like how to
Yeah.
approach a case of insomnia, please.
Yeah. So at the very outset, obviously, when a patient presents to our clinic with insomnia, obviously the longitudinal history taking is very important as far as from my point of experience. Unless and until we take a longitudinal history, we won't be finding out the cause of insomnia, right? So as we all know, insomnias are divided like primary, secondarily due to anxiety, depression, whatever psychotic process if the patient is going on. And although the substance abuse history needs to be clarified first, and obviously depression and with anxiety, there will be the stress factor which will be coming up. So apart from what I feel, the medication part, a holistic, I mean, to see a holistic management plan needs to be formulated apart from the medication. If needs the CBT part or family therapy part or whatever needs to be done regarding depression and anxiety. And for say management of insomnia, if it's a primary insomnia without any comorbidities, I tend to follow a very simple rule that unless and until as far as possible, we need to try to avoid those benzodiazepines, because most of the cases goes into dependence pattern on benzodiazepines. So preferably I do start with a very low dose of zolpidem type of molecule, and then if and then go on to increase the dose. But sort of the might be more experience in this regard. Nowadays very new molecules are coming up, like the melatonin agonist, and even the newer medications like the orexin antagonist. So they are coming into our armamentarium for medication part. And obviously if there are comorbidities, I strongly believe that if you target to resolve the comorbidity part like the depression, anxiety, or substance abuse, and even the psychotic, if a patient with psychosis presents with sleep disturbances, I think if the comorbidity part is handled well, then sleep is automatically improved.
Thank you, Anvesh. You have given a very nice explanation of the thing. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Sachin to talk on the same topic, like your personal approach to cases of insomnia. Dr. Sachin, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. See, if you look at, there are, I was going through one of the article or the supplement which review article which was shared with us, especially with me, that Roth, sleep and dementia. See, if we go through that, they clearly mentioned, see, there are certain things which we need to keep in mind when you approach apart from taking history, whether it is first is establishing primary insomnia or secondary insomnia. So probably if it is primary insomnia, we have the treatment approach definitely changes, and if it is a secondary insomnia, probably treating the cause and again probably using the medications appropriately. Probably if you look at, there are points like they mentioned, eliminate all forms of stimulant foods, be it a caffeine or alcohol, which they very clearly mentioned. Then the second thing is look for any this one, what you call it as doing all this using this medications, especially they say benzodiazepines are not the first line of drugs nowadays. The lifestyle modifications are the sleep hygiene techniques, and with that also, if the patient does not improve, probably using a long-acting benzodiazepines. And if it is a primary insomnia, if there is an underlying and depressive disorder, probably using a antidepressant with a sedative property like trazodone or mirtazapine, when I was reading. And if it is a psychotic individual, probably using quetiapine. These kind of drugs are the major this one. And nonetheless, probably before considering medications, doing detailed evaluation history-wise and be it a evaluation like getting a polysomnography and going into their this one sleep-wake cycle pattern and bringing lifestyle modification and non-pharmacological interventions are the first line what I would recommend. And considering the current generation, the people, especially the screen exposure, which is more in the late night, those also things to be kept into consideration. Directly jumping into, okay, you have a sleep disturbance. We see many physicians and even the neurophysicians, neurosurgeons, and other general practitioners directly give a alprazolam or some sedative medication. So you keep taking this whenever you have sleep disturbance. Probably that is where they are getting into abuse and treating one disease. We are actually heterogeneically start inducing one more disease. Probably these are the main key points I would like to.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sachin. I would like to add one little thing that the biggest problem with continuously continuing with the benzodiazepines are actually twofold. The first one is the risk of falls. There is an increased risk of falls, particularly in the elderlies, and
Yes.
more at the night times when they are waking up to go to the washroom and stuff like that, and they fall and they have various hip joint fractures to pelvic fractures, which are very very cumbersome.
Yes.
The other point of continuing with a sleeping pill for a long period of time is the risk of cognitive decline and cognitive degeneration. There are multiple studies, in fact, scores of studies which says that if like sleeping medications, particularly the benzodiazepines, they are continued for say years, it does decrease in the it causes a decrease in the cognitive capabilities and the cognitive functioning of individuals, and there has been an increased risk of developing dementia of various kinds, particularly Alzheimer's, who in those patients who had been on sleep medications or benzodiazepine medications for a long period of time. So thank you, Sachin, for your nice input. Now, I would like to thank Dr. Jai Meher Singh, who has said that an eye-opening seminar about sleep. So, thank you, Dr. Singh. He has also asked a question that is there a hierarchy of psychiatric medications to try in a patient having a primary psychiatric disorders with prominent sleep disturbances, both for neurotic and psychotic spectrum? I would like to invite Dr. Harshal Sathe to answer this question. Dr. Harshal, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm there. It's a long question. I'll just read it once again.
Oh, sure. You can see it in the chat box.
Yes, sir, I am able to see.
Okay.
Is there a hierarchy of medication to try in a patient having primary psychiatric?
And I can also see Dr. Subham Sabarwal is here. Welcome, Subham.
Yeah. Basically, he has asked, I think he has asked mainly in the psychiatric patients. If patients are either neurotic patients or the psychiatric patients. So I think the first priority after diagnosing a psychiatric disorder, let us say we have diagnosed a case with schizophrenia, and a case of schizophrenia alongside is also having the sleep disturbance. So our priority first is in general, when we treat these patients, we start them on the antipsychotic medication. And what happens is that many of these antipsychotic medication are alongside also having antihistaminic properties and are hypnotic. So first we see that we start them on the core medication, which is the medication of choice for that particular condition. And we try to see if the patient's sleep is getting normalized. That is what is happening in. But in sometimes the sleep disturbance is very prominent, and the medication which we want to start does not have the hypnotic effect. Like for example, in depression, I want to start a patient on escitalopram. I know that escitalopram will show its effect after 7 to 14 days. Until then, the sleep disturbance will keep on causing problems for the patient. In this case, I can consider starting an independent hypnotic agent temporarily for some time. So I think the hierarchy wise, first we have to start the medication which is the medication of choice for that particular disorder, whether the disorder is in the psychotic spectrum or not. Second, we see whether that particular medication also have any hypnotic effect. If it is having any hypnotic effect, then we do not start a separate hypnotic till verifying whether the patient is getting adequate sleep with the same medication. But if, for example, if somatic symptom disorder patient also having sleep problems, I give him amitriptyline, then amitriptyline is also having sedative impact. So I'll first see for a week whether the patient is able to sleep with properly or not, and at the same time I also prescribe him the sleep hygiene and other things. And but if the symptom is not getting relieved, then there is a chance that the existing insomnia might aggravate the primary psychotic disorder or a neurotic disorder. So initially for 2 weeks or for a month, I may consider giving an additional prescription of a hypnotic with a clear warning to the patient that long-term use of this medication has a dependence potential and that it will be tapered off after a few days. So I think initially we start with the patient having the hypnotic medication, especially if the patient is having sleep disturbances. But later on, we go on to continue the patient on the maintenance medication, which do not have any hypnotic properties by themselves, and we encourage the sleep by the own physiological mechanism.
Thank you, Dr. Harshal, for explaining nicely to the question. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Ruma Bhattacharya, Senior Consultant Psychiatrist from Bhopal, who is also the EC Committee member for this Sleep Medicine Subspecialty of Indian Psychiatric Society. Welcome, Ruma ma'am. Are you there? Hello.
Yeah,
Hello,
I'm there. Yeah, hi.
I would like
Good
to hand
afternoon,
over.
everyone.
Good afternoon. I would like to hand over the mic to you for concluding the session, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah. It was really a nice Sunday morning. Now it's afternoon. I think there is a shortage of attendance because of the ongoing WCAT conference in Hyderabad as
There are
well.
actually some other there is also another thing you can see. There is live webinar. There are around 15 people joined from there also. So it is
Oh,
actually
that's very nice.
yes. So we are having around 30.
I don't know if this is, I hope this is recorded and we can pass on to people who would be
Yes, ma'am. It is being
interested.
recorded. Yes.
Honestly, like me being the EC coordinator of this specialty section, sleep medicine, has given me the opportunity to learn so much from all of you guys, including Dr. Saurabh, Dr. Anveshak, Dr. Priyaranjan, Dr. Harshal, Dr. Ankur, Dr. Sachin. It's been really nice, and I hope we do more of these so that at least I can learn more on sleep and pass on to my, patients. Because the more we learn, the more we can benefit our patients, which is our main aim, and to benefit ourselves also. So congratulations to the whole IPS sleep medicine specialty section. Dr. Sanjeev Datta, the advisor, chairperson Dr. Ravi Gupta, and you, the convener. And thanks all the speakers actually to have devoted so much of time in preparation and, putting them all in so much of an abridged, form. So crisp presentations, except for a slight technical glitch, I think it went really well. And I'm really proud of all of you. So this was really nice, and hope you, Dr. Saurav, as the convener, would take sleep medicine to further heights.
I'll try my best, ma'am.
Yeah. So I guess we all must be feeling hungry on this Sunday afternoon. So thank you once again.
Thank you everyone. Thank you all my dear friends.
Yeah, so we can now conclude the webinar. We can all log off, or is there anything else to do?
Ma'am, yes, just one thing. We also have to thank Sun Pharmaceuticals, our logistic partner, and who have arranged this beautiful platform for us.
Absolutely. Symbiosis, I guess, has done the...
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
And all the IPS dignitaries, office bearers, and everyone. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. I'm logging off.
Bye, everyone. Me too.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Recording stopped.